And then we moved on to truth, goodness, and beauty. And in our culture has kind of lost its way on the idea of what's right and wrong. It seems like right now wrong is right and right is wrong, and you're right and my right, and who knows who's right. We know who's right because there's only one truth, and the truth is a person. His name's Jesus, and his message is consistent. But we started going through, we used the law of non-contradiction, and this idea that contrary perspectives can't both exist at the same time. Well, we see this over and over again in our culture right now. But they'll say, truth is relative. Well, that can't also be true, because then it wouldn't be relative, because that would be ultimately true. So we have to kind of look at this, and this is one way to kind of expose the false claims that we have in our society in a way that the person you're talking to will go, oh, you're kind of right. And that's what we want to do. We want to put the stone in their shoe so that they think about their false claim and hopefully change their mind and start looking for what is true. And basically the way we do this to any objection is to try to reverse the claim on itself. And we went through a couple examples of these. And the common objections to truth, and we're just talking about truth here, is there is no truth, you can't know truth, all the truth is relative, it's true for you but not for me, no one has the truth, and you ought not judge. Those are the 6 big ones. You'll hear them in different forms. So there is no truth. Well, how do we respond? Is that true? It's actually, okay. You can't know the truth.
How do you know that?
How do you know that is true? If you can't know the truth, you're making an awful big claim. All truth is relative. That sounds absolute, right? Or it's true for you and not for me. Is that true for everybody? Exactly. No one has the truth. Well, is that true? I mean, you just said no one has the truth, and if it was true, then it wouldn't be true, so it can't be true, right? And then you ought not judge, and that sounds a lot like a judgment. And these are not meant to put people at a disadvantage. What it's meant to do is break down their barriers so they're willing to listen. So we got to be careful in the way we present these type of responses. We can't be sassy, we can't be angry. That's the reason for Kokel's tactics book. He has much better demeanor than I do, and this idea of phrasing the question as an information gathering activity. Instead of being accusatory, you want to gather information to understand their perspective and allow them to deconstruct their false view on their own. So again, take the claim and then some form of what do you mean by that? Whatever that is, whatever the claim is. And even if you don't understand the claim, it's a really good idea to ask the question back at them. It allows you to clarify what it is they're saying. This works in any kind of conversation, by the way. If you're not clear, instead of trying to answer, ask a question that clarifies what's going on. It's non-combative, and it puts you on an even foundation with the person you're talking to, and you might even get to the foundation of their problem. What about this one? Are you saying that if I don't believe the way you do, I'm sent to hell? What do you do with something like that? I mean, believe it or not, this is not, different forms of this is what people will say. You can try to answer it a lot of different ways. What do you think sends you to hell?
Maybe.
Well, what do you believe? I mean, they're saying, you don't like what I believe. What do you believe? Again, information. I don't understand your question, which actually is a good question to ask sometimes, because sometimes you're like, so what's your point? But you can't say it that way. You got to say it a little nicer. So find a way to maybe ask a question. It's like, I don't really understand what you're asking me. It sounds like you're telling me something. What are you really asking me? Or do you believe in heaven and hell? That's a wide open one. Megan, I would have asked her that. It's like, you're talking about God and hell, so do you believe in heaven and hell? And if the answer is no, then why are you talking about it? I mean, I can tell you things about it if you'd like the information, but another way to attack these type of questions, because this is a complicated question, is the two-step method. And I like this method. And the idea is to try to identify common ground with the person that's asking the question. So the person that says, if I don't believe the way you do, I'm sent to hell. Well, okay, let's take a step back from that for a second. Do you believe that people that do bad things should be punished? With almost zero exception, everybody's going to say, yeah. I mean, if someone steals my wallet, I want them to get punished, or takes anything from me, or hurts me. Yeah, I want to believe that they're going to get punished. They should get punished. And then come back with the tougher question. It's like, well, have you ever done anything bad? Well, anybody that says they haven't just lied. So they just did. So what this does is open up the fact that we believe punishment should be carried out for people who do bad things. Except for us. We want the exception. And then we can get into a conversation about hell. Because God doesn't send anyone to hell. You do bad things, and then the punishment happens to be that. And that's a different conversation. It's a lot deeper. You shouldn't get into that conversation with an atheist anyway. You should talk about this type of thing until you get to the point where we can talk a little deeper about what it means in the Bible. There are Christians who don't understand this doctrine. So I think the idea is to break down the barrier of the person you're talking to, so it ratchet down that tension a little bit so you can have a conversation about what is it that they really are asking about. Because when they ask a question like this, it's not about whether they're going to go to hell or not. They want to know why you're judging them or why you think you're better than them. And we don't. We don't think we're better than them. And that's the message we've got to get across to them. Well, we don't think we're better. We're just trying to follow the person that is. And that's what better looks like and why that is. And you can get into that piece by piece. Questions? So that's kind of... So the next thing we did was go after the probably the big question of our era, which is there a God? And of course the answer is yes. Okay, so, but how do you get that point across to people that don't believe? Because atheism is a very significant viewpoint in our day. And I propose to us that we use science and the scientific method and reason and logic. There are a lot of Christians that would cringe at the fact that I would say such a thing. But I believe God made science as a scientific method and all those things. And we can use what we use every day making every decision we make, which is essentially cumulative case approach. You don't know you do it, but you do it. When you decided to come over here, you had to choose your route. You weighed which one was going to be quicker, what traffic, whatever the reason is. You like the view. There's a reason you made your choices. You had multiple choices. That's cumulative case approach. We use it in every decision we make. So why not this one? Okay, and what I would like to propose and what we've talked about is going through the evidence. And does the atheist case have more evidence than we have for the existence of God? And obviously I believe it doesn't, but that's the reason we went through it step by step. And there's so much evidence for God. And we just went through a few of these. You have the beginning argument, which they call the cosmological argument. You have the design. We know everything around us from the universe to the subatomic scales is highly designed. That's the teleological argument. Design usually means a designer. Morality, right and wrong, that's the moral argument. There has to be a basis for right and wrong. We think that points to God. There's also this being, the idea that the fact that we can perceive good and bad and there has to be something that is that perfect model, that perfect basis, that effectively is the ontological argument. Then truth itself, what we just talked about, is a basis, has to be something that's perfect. That has to be God. The fact that we can actually talk and pass information back and forth. Information is one of these things that is not logical or reasonable, but we use it without understanding even the basic of why. That, again, is a good argument for God. They call it the information argument. The fact that we perceive things as pretty or ugly, that's aesthetics or beauty. Well, we have to have a basis for that. It has to come from our Maker. It doesn't come from, it transcends cultures, so you know it's not culturally driven. Now, people can have different opinions, but there are certain things, like a rainbow, that most people recognize as pretty. I mean, most people will see a sunset and say it's pretty. Okay, why is that? It's colors, but that has to be baked into us by a creator. And obviously our mind itself, consciousness, mathematic principles themselves. We take them for granted in science, but without these basic principles, we couldn't even do science. Logic and reason themselves, obviously the laws and constants in science, meaning and purpose that we glean from our existence, the historical Jesus and the resurrection, then the supernatural like miracles, the metaphysical like spiritual encounters, and even near-death experiences. And there's more. You look in like Geisler's book and Turick's book have a lot of this kind of thing. But we looked at these as we were going through. And I mean, first is, I think most people take the beginning argument and without oversimplifying it, almost everybody agrees in the scientific world that there's a beginning. Okay, there are people that will argue against it, but they have no evidence. The evidence points to a beginning, and we call it the Big Bang in science. And in the Christian world, we say that needs a big banger, right? Which we know is God, right? If there's a cause, there has to be something that started it. Aristotle called it the unmoved mover. A lot of Christian apologists say it's the first cause. It's something that's outside of the universe that made the universe. If it was in the universe, then it couldn't make the universe before the universe was there, right? So there has to be something outside of the universe to make everything. The big banger. The big guy upstairs, whatever you want to call him. It's God. Another argument was the moral argument, the right and wrong. And atheists have tried all different ways to get around this question. And the most compelling argument was by Sam Harris. And he talked about the fact that you can explain right and wrong by human flourishing. And whatever is best for human flourishing determines right and wrong. And he was partly correct. The bottom line is, who gets to decide what human flourishing looks like? We know through history, dictators and leaders and even whole societies have chose what's right and wrong, and it doesn't look very right to us. The standard has to be someone that's perfect. It has to be someone that's outside of our existence. So Sam actually got it partially right. We know that yes, what's best for human flourishing is right and wrong, but the human flourishing is based on God's perspective on what human flourishing looks like. We sacrifice for others. If we're doing what Christ has asked us to do, you serve others, and sometimes it's at a loss for you, but that's what's best for the community. That's what makes us grow in our relationship, not only with each other, but with God. That's human flourishing. That's God's standard. That doesn't match any human selfish standard. You're never going to get past the selfishness. That's the reason governments always lean toward totalitarian activity, because the elites want what's best for them and they don't care about anybody else. That's not human flourishing, though. That's maybe personal flourishing for the people at the top. Another one we looked at was the design argument. And again, we looked at all the different levels of existence. And I was amazed that if you look at each level of existence, the complexity and the diversity at the universe scale, as well as at the subatomic scale and everything in between, is just amazing. I mean, it's not what you would imagine the naturalistic viewpoint would give rise to. I mean, an example at the universe scale is, we have all these galaxies, right? Why are there only a few kinds of galaxies if you have randomness? But there are certain galaxy formations that tend to be the one that happens. But there's others that break the rules, but there's not a randomness of non-structure. There's structure there. There's design there. Why? Because if it's truly the naturalistic model, you should just have, anything should go, or only one should go. There shouldn't be a variety. There should either be one that everything leans toward or just anything goes. And you see that at the galaxy level, you see it at the solar system, and so on. But what we really saw out of these arguments was the cosmological argument, or the beginning argument, shows that whoever or whatever created the universe was immaterial, has to be timeless and spaceless, outside of the universe, or it doesn't work. It has to be extremely powerful to make something from nothing, obviously, right? The design argument shows us that whatever made everything had to be incredibly intelligent, or without intelligence, there can't be design. It's like dropping a bunch of sticks on the floor and expecting paper to pop out, right? Without intelligence, there's no way to push toward design. Also, there has to be something that is sustaining the way things work and giving them purpose. We see the universe and our science falls apart because it doesn't answer the questions. Oh, if the universe is this old, then why do we still have this? Why is it purposeful? Why does it look like everything follows laws? In the Bible, we call that dominion. God has dominion over everything. That means there's constants that basically guide the activities and purpose of everything that God's created. And then moral, the Creator has to have some sort of absolute morality. They have to be perfect to be the basis for what right and wrong is. And they also have to be personal because they care about interpersonal relationships. And as you just go through these, which are just 3 out of the 18 arguments that we showed up there, you can see that it's describing more and more the God that we describe in Christianity. As the God of the Bible, I say the fingerprints of the God of the Bible are all over creation. And that's just using three arguments. I actually think the information argument and the conscious argument is even more compelling. So next we moved on to the problem of evil. And this is the one that atheists always tried to use against Christianity. And it's a tough one to talk about. That's the reason everybody cried when we did this session. Because we've all experienced things that we think are bad. Evil is maybe too strong of a word, I think. But we do have to define it. And evil is the absence of goodness. We use shadow as one of their examples. If the light turns off, there's no shadow. Evil can't exist unless there's something to compare it to. So there has to be goodness or there could not be evil. And we know that, especially this time of year, coming up on Easter, that humans are capable of doing horrible things to each other. Jesus experienced that, obviously, on the cross. And we need to not minimize that in any way, but we recognize that there's purposes often for things we perceive as evil. I think we can guess what the purpose was of what Jesus suffered for us. So when we start looking at evil, we have to look at it, okay. Evil is the absence of goodness. Define what it is. There's no evil if there isn't goodness. And there can't be goodness without God. So evil actually proves the existence of God. We don't have to understand evil to know that it proves the existence of God. People like Megan, because something bad happened to her, said it was proof there was no God. And what I would like the opportunity to tell her is it's not proof there's no God. It's proof that maybe God wants to get your attention. Because that's probably more likely. I don't know what his purposes are. But the fact that there is something I perceive as bad means there has to be something that's good. It means there has to be a standard for that good. That has to be God. So when we look through it, it's evil proves the existence of God. And whether we understand it or not, there's a purpose for what we perceive as evil. And when we went through a lot of examples when we went through the session, I don't understand it. I won't even begin to understand it. But I trust the person who does. And that's God. And there's a remedy for the evil in the world. And that is Jesus and what he did for us. And more importantly, it's we're meant to be the remedy for the evil in our world. When you see evil around us, and it's like, who's going to do something about it? Well, guess what? You just volunteered. I like, there's a song by Matthew West. It's called Do Something. And one of the phrases in his song is this, we shake our fist at heaven. Why don't you do something, God? And God's response to us is really simple. I did. I made you. You're it. Go do something. You saw it. I put it on your heart for a reason. You're the one. So when we see things around us that we don't like, well, guess what? That's God telling you that you're up. It's your turn. Go do something. If someone around you doesn't recognize it's bad, then they're not up. But you recognized it. God wants you to do something about it. And I just love this quote. I won't try to pronounce his last name, but Jacques-Marie Uzi Monsabre. Yeah, so he's a Dominican monk in France, his French name. And this is one of the best quotes. If God would concede me his omnipotence for 24 hours, you would see the many changes I would make in the world. But if he gave me his wisdom too, I would leave things as they are. And it's so true. We can see that there's things we would want to change in this world. But we don't see the full picture. We can't understand. I can't understand. But God wants us to be part of whatever that is, and we should get involved. And I also like this quote from C.S. Lewis. It says, it's from the problem of pain. It said, God whispers to us in our pleasure, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is the megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And it's a sad commentary on us, but unfortunately it's true. We often don't turn to God when things are going well for us. That's shame on us. It takes pain to look to God. And the question you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I say it is. I gave an example of one of our students died of cancer in the Philippines back in August. And it pains me. I mourn for it today, but because of her death, her mom came to a relationship with Jesus. Was it worth it? I think you have to say yes. I think, I went through an illness, but it awakened me. I'm so thankful to God that happened, because without it, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be useful in the kingdom. So, yeah, I don't understand pain, but I trust that there's a purpose. And when people come to us in those circumstances, that's the message we have to get across is, I don't understand. Share in their pain and reassure them. And when they're at the point that they can understand, it's like there's going to be a purpose in this. We can trust God because I have experience with my own pain and it had a purpose, right?